my place this time around, but we still have the awesome Mr. Greg Burrow, my co-host and partner in crime fighting, here on loan from us from Dragons and Comics and Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. We're going to be talking about a lot of cool comic book stuff up here, and you might be able to reach down there and find some more things. And then, of course, the Duchess of Protocol, Mrs. Anastasia Anderson, who will be our fact checker to try and keep us as honest as possible. And today we are talking about superhero Spycraft. We are anticipating that next month, just to give you a heads up, we're not going to be on next month. We're taking a break for the summer. But at the beginning of next month is finally the Black Widow movie is coming out.
And we're going to be seeing it at the Bullock Laser IMAX. So I'm really
we will make a few live posts from that and everything. So
We've been
waiting
a long time.
But for now, we are going to be talking about superhero Spycraft, and we're going to give you a little bit of the history of spies in superhero comics, not necessarily spy comics, because there's a lot of spy comics.
Oh my god.
It's a whole genre into itself. But we're doing that Venn diagram thing that we do here on the Red Web, where it's like we're taking a topic and how is it related to superheroes. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have a lot of really interesting things going. Now, when we come back at the end of the month, not only will we be coming back with a slightly adjusted new format, we are going to be coming back and telling you our opinion of the Black Widow movie. We figured a month will be enough for everybody to get the spoilers out of their blood.
Hopefully.
Yep. So that way we can feel pretty safe in talking to you about that. We will mention Black Widow here, and we're going to give you her place in the history of the spy genre. But
hopefully we'll talk about some of the other things that have happened over the summer too. Loki is going on right now. So much fun.
Yes. So we are going to have that's our end of the summer. So we are going to do an end of the summer review. So make sure you check that, and we'll go over all of the.
We're going to cover all of them.
The Marvel shows and all the little Netflix things and the things that we wanted to talk about, but we didn't want to just do 5 minutes. So today's superhero Spycraft. Starting back in, I believe we found some of the earliest ones were back in the 30s when Superman came out. Now, as you've probably seen on our previous episode, if you haven't, go back and check it. It's really good. It's our prototype superhero episode where we talk about Pulp Fiction and crime noir. Well, that's the 20s-ish to the mid-20s to the late 30s. And this is after World War I. This is when everything's leading up to World War II, the first Cold War kind of situation and everything. So spies were a big thing. In fact, the term mystery men that they applied to the original pulp characters basically is because so many of them were involved in the spy craft. And so that kind of lended into a lot of the archetype of any of the superheroes in general. Even Batman and Blue Beetle, one of the main ones that we found, 1939 in Wiz Comics. Now, Wiz Comics is the comic book by Fawcett Comics that is the original publisher of Captain Marvel. So in the same world as Captain Marvel originally, before they were purchased by DC Comics, we had the Spy Smasher, who was, as I know you found out, he was a more of a gadget-based kind of.
Yeah, so basically like Batman. He had the money and he had the intelligence to be able to create these fancier gadgets and use them to be a super secret agent. It's like, and all of those follow the heels of. We'll get it out of the way, James Bond. James Bond popularized so much of this.
So much. And the cool thing about the Spy Smasher comic books and stuff like that we were talking about, and not only is there a big overlap in the spy/superhero world, you find that spy is actually the missing link between the military comic book character, military type heroes and superheroes. It's the merge in between them. So super spies can go either way as they're going. And we found a lot of our research that the spy trade was inherently tied up with wartime comics.
It absolutely was.
So we're gonna try and figure out where does that delve away and when does it still fit into the superhero mold. Some of the other ones back then to start off with, like I said, DC Comics, they came out with their character King Faraday, who was basically their version of Nick Fury before Marvel's Nick Fury came out. And we'll give you a little bit more of his background in a minute. But then you get into Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos, which we had thought was published closer to the 40s. We had thought that he was published in the actual 40s, but it wasn't published until 65. We found out it was when Nick Fury was created as a flashback comic. And yes, there was a lot of stories that they incorporated Captain America into in those flashback stories. So it made it feel like they were from the 40s. But they were really from the 60s. And then of course, 69, when Jim Steranko takes Nick Fury into a whole other direction, and he instead of being Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, it's Commander Fury, Agent of Shield. So that's pretty much where we kick off the true super spy / superhero merging. And
Yeah.
did I miss anybody else like really really cool before we get onto our lists? Any?
Again, it was just, especially in the 50s and 60s, spies were really huge. I mean, there was Man from U.N.C.L.E., there was Get Smart, there was so many different ones. There was the original, there was the Avengers in England with Emma Peel. There was, it was just, it was a huge, giant thing. And so many knockoffs of James Bond and just a man named Flint,
Yeah.
So it permeated every aspect of society back then. I mean, it was like, so it was, again, vital for us for the show to pull it just to superhero type, interactions with spies and superheroes, not just, like the Man from U.N.C.L.E. or something like that.
Right. And you guys are going to recognize some of these tropes. It's like you're going to have the hardened veteran that has to turn to spy work. You've got the
rich adventure seeker.
The rich adventure seeker, the super suave James Bond type, the femme fatale character. Just they're all here, and they all have some sort of like historic link to them. But overall, because I forgot about the Cold War for some reason, it's
there was the Cold War, but there were things that were called Cold Wars before that.
Yeah. It's like, but the Cold War we're usually thinking about, it's like it made a transition because when Spice came out, a lot of them were intertwined with military stuff, and obviously we got to a point where we were really disheartened with straight up war things, and it's like the complicit feeling you get with associating with the war stuff. But Spies made it more interesting because it was not only sexier, like James Bond made it a sexy kind of thing to do, but it helped put a healthy distance between between you and whatever the war is concerning. It's like, this isn't a person who's going and killing the wrong people. He's killing the right people.
Well, that's the whole concept of...
He doesn't even have to kill anybody.
Yeah, the whole concept of Cold War was to create that sense of...
that distance.
The distance, because it's all theoretical still.
Yeah.
It's all theoretical, which is what made it such a right genre for comic books, superhero, most all media, because, then you have, the what ifs, you have the ideas of the race for technologies that the Cold War brought out, and things like that really gave us like a lot of, it fueled so much science fiction, but especially
it sparks the imagination. It's like, and because Spies is a separate thing from us. It's not like how war scares people, where it's this is a reality we can visually see, and this is a reality that can come for us. Yeah. So a lot of people leaned into these stories a lot more.
So we're going to go real quick over what we're going to consider superhero spies. As we said, there's plenty of spies in comic books, especially even in superhero comic books. We're definitely not doing any licensed things. That's not really our jam here on the Red Web. But also, we are avoiding things that are just vaguely spy, because let's face it, every superhero has had some kind of spying experience. I mean,
they have a spy episode.
It's just a drama that they add to it. So yeah, one of the things we were looking through, and it's like, oh yeah, we find lists and lists of like, well, the time this guy spied on this guy. I mean, it's like, you know what? Eavesdropping around the kitchen door isn't really the same.
Or
that's
like,
what we're doing here.
And we tried to exclude people who their entire superhero character is completely different, and then for like 2 episodes they're a spy, and then they transition back.
So yeah, we're going with ones that were actually in the Spycraft in espionage style stories.
Right.
So
they might have superpowers, but their superpower is that they're a good spy, basically.
But there are a couple of them with some interesting superpowers, or at least like as you said, many of them were tech based.
Right.
So we'll go over that. So stay tuned for that. We're breaking it down into a couple of wide sections for you. I think the first section up, we're going to talk about some freelancers, characters who are individuals, and then we're going to move on to characters who are part of an organization. So.
Yeah, and these are we're gonna start off with DC, and then we're gonna go to Marvel.
All right.
Yes.
So our first section here is on the Superhero Spycraft episode today. We're going to be looking over the DC Comics freelance characters. These are characters in DC Comics superhero genre that have had extensive experience as a spy or as a espionage agent, and it's not necessarily their full-time gig. They're known for other things in the superhero comic, but they had enough of it that they come from a spy background before being the character that we know now, or they take a good hiatus for a while as a spy. And the first one I find those
sometimes they get called back into it.
And then sometimes they get called back into it. The first one we're going to start with, and I found this one pretty funny and interesting, is Alfred Pennyworth.
Yeah.
As we all know, is Bruce Wayne's devoted butler in Batman comic books. And I was telling the guys some fun stuff that I had dug up a long time ago, actually, and then it just came back up in the research for this. For those of you who don't know, Alfred, in his first appearance in Batman comic books, was actually named Alfred Beagle. I don't remember why they changed it to Pennyworth. Maybe just because it sounded cooler and more Britishy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of a James Bond transition, it's very much a Pennyworth sounds very sexy and dignified and junk.
Yeah. You know what? I would be curious to know. Did they name him Pennyworth after Moneypenny? Maybe? Is that a related thing?
I mean, probably.
Well, that's when they decided to make him more of having come from a espionage background. So I think the way eventually it played out, other thing, which I always found particularly funny, early on they established that Alfred had a relative, and they always implied it was his brother. He had a relative named Jarvis, and vice versa on the Avengers, Jarvis. They would actually, the writers would just like randomly throw in these things where they're talking on the phone to each other. You'll have to go and look some of them up, but I found some of them, and they're actually quite funny because they're not really committing to anything, but it's an inside joke, right? Well, when in modern comics, when they did the reimagining of Alfred Pennyworth, he wasn't originally the Wayne's servant. His father, Jarvis Beagle, named Jarvis after, of course, Jarvis from Avengers, and Beagle for his original Golden Age name. But Jarvis Beagle was was Thomas and Martha Wayne's servant, and when they died and he was sick, he asked Alfred to come on and take over as the new butler. Well, turns out what Alfred was doing at this point, he was actually part of MI6.
Yeah.
And so he had a lot of experience in the Spycraft, and then they would frequently flash back to some of the stories of him when he was younger, and B, utilize his skills and such from that time in his training of Batman, and then of Bruce, of course, and then of course in his service of Batman. So he's more than just your average butler.
Right. And they try to allude to that in the movies sometimes.
Yeah, they start with the Michael Caine one.
They heavily allude to it in like Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns,
to it in a lot of the Batman comics over the years.
Right. I just remember it being such a shock because it's like vague memories, but they're like, oh my God, he's just pulling out a gun. What's going on? And it's like, yeah, he used to be in the military. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. There was a particularly good, not that I like New 52 at all, but in the Flashpoint series, the original Flashpoint series, they actually had a mysterious clandestine spy organizer named, what was his name? Oh, the Outsider. He was named the Outsider. The Outsider, and he was basically the Flashpoint universe's version of Nick Fury, and the big reveal at the end was that he was Alfred. I'm not feeling bad about spoiling this because I don't think anybody's going to go out there and find that to read it.
Right, spoiler alert.
It's
if you feel like looking for it.
If you feel like looking for it, please do, but...
Is that it? Yeah, that's the...
That was what led up to...
So the next one's going to be pretty interesting.
Next one's actually pretty cool. You want to tell us about?
Well, of course, we all know Dick Grayson as Robin, but
Slash
for a second...
Right,
Slash Nightwing. But he actually, for a while there, he was actually just going under the name of Grayson because he was outed as Robin. And so he had to go undercover for a while, and he actually joined a spy organization. And
yes, Bruce Wayne actually put him up to it. He's like, hey, while you're hiding out, let's take advantage of your needing to be anonymous. And I need you to infiltrate this organization called Spiral that I've come across, who is actually watching the superheroes when they shouldn't be, and we need to take them down.
Oh, so, Bruce, you.
So he gives him some kind of an implant in his eye, an optical implant that makes him invisible to people's consciousness. Okay. The way I explain it is it's like the perception filter on Doctor Who, if you're familiar with that. It's not like they're invisible or anything.
They're just forgettable.
They're forgettable. People just don't notice them. Or even if he interacts with people directly, they'll talk to him, but then their mind, they can't quite focus on his face or details about him. So when he leaves, he's very Men in Blacky and they don't know he's there and whatever. So they kind of mind wipe him and stuff. Of course, the funniest part, which you want to tell her?
Oh, it's like if you've ever noticed the weird amount of butt jokes about Robin on Teen Titans, that I didn't know that was an actual running gag. He has a fantastic butt, and to the point where in one of these stories, someone recognizes him because they recognize his butt, and I was like, wait, this isn't just a weird thing they put in the movie.
No. They've had a whole thing about Duke Grayson. It comes up in a lot of stuff for years now in the Nightwing comic book.
That's hysterical.
Even pre New 52, yeah.
That is the most delightful thing I've learned.
There was a specific reason that I forget what the female ones were, but the little anime sexy statues. DC was doing the anime sexy statues, and they did their first Bishoujo was Nightwing. Yeah. Bishoujo was Nightwing, and he's literally standing with his mask over his back like this, and he's got the full on Black Widow ass pose.
Filthy weeb terminology. Bishoujo is sexy girls. Bishonens are sexy boys.
Bishonen. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I was proud I got that close.
What? Yes, you did great. It's filthy weed facts.
Yeah. But that's an ongoing thing, and Apollo and the Midnighter, the Wildstorm equivalent of Batman. He's the gay Batman, and he does this one story where he teams up with Grayson, and he's the first one to realize, wait a minute, I know that butt.
Right, wait a minute.
He recognizes him from that. So that was another funny one.
That's delightful.
And the next one has a history going back a lot further into the 60s, and
in the 70s.
In the 70s, yeah. But I suspect that it was inspired by Nick Fury.
I don't know if that's the case. I just know that the Wonder Woman numbers were going down.
Right.
And so they were trying to do something to bring more interest back to Wonder Woman.
And that was almost the same time that the Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. comic book was going up. When it started in 69 and ran until 78.
So Dennis O'Neil decided to take away Wonder Woman's powers and give her a white outfit that's basically like a white suit and
which
make
is
her
very
into
much
a spy.
Like the Black Widow suit in the movie.
Yeah, make her into a spy, and she just went under the name of Diana Prince, which had mixed reviews by fans. I know that Gloria Steinem, who had just launched Miss Magazine,
Wonder Woman as the first
with
cover.
Wonder Woman as the first cover, was outraged and horrified by what was happening to Wonder Woman. So much so that she wrote so many letters that eventually they turned Wonder Woman back with all of her powers and everything, and wrote her a letter back saying, "Hey, we've given Wonder Woman back her powers.
Right.
We've given her back her uniform. Please stop writing us."
Right.
So.
And it's like having visual examples now. I get why she was like, this wasn't a good idea, because it's like you have this one quintessential female superhero, and the thing they decide to do with her to spice her up is to strip her of all of her powers. And now we, of course, know story-wise, you can absolutely have a character that is still a superhero, but is required to be a spy for reasons. It's like, gee, I wonder why a person who has superpowers would want to hide their identity for something until absolutely necessary.
Well, I mean, even in the Wonder Woman television show with Linda Carter, she was the spy in those too.
Before Linda Carter, though, the Catherine Lee Crosby movie was very much set up as as you could see where it was taken from this iteration of Wonder Woman, the comic book, and it was very much more of a spy-based kind of thing. Yeah. You know, with her her airplane not being magical, but super technology and stuff like that. You know, and so that went, and then it's had long reach in effect since then. Yeah. And like Greg said, in the Linda Carter version of the TV show, and we were talking about the overlap between spycraft and military. The first season was in World War II, and that was, of course, where it was more military focused. Yeah. Right. But then when they decided to bring it up into the modern era at that time of the 70s, Cold War, boom. Yeah. You know? Right. And she very much was both superhero and super spy. Well,
and they have recently even done a few issues where they brought her back into the spycraft and stuff. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been several storylines where Wonder Woman has gone, and I think they had just done a really nice, good long arc of it before New 52 started.
Yeah. Right, and then they sprinkle it in with the Wonder Woman movie, so it's like it's always there. It's one of those things where it's closely intertwined with her character.
Mm-hmm.
Enough that we're like, don't add us, don't comment about this. It counts. It's our show. It's our rules. It's fine.
We're going to move on. We're still on DC Comics. This is the second part of our superhero Spycraft episode. And
so this one's not just the random, like, individual characters. This is more of an organization.
Correct. Right, and these are the
people. So this is a major DC spy organization.
Yes.
So even though they didn't appear until almost 10 years after the Marvel S.H.I.E.L.D. organization, DC had their own organization called Checkmate. If you watch,
I would say 20 years because it was 88, right?
78 to 88 is only, or 79 to 88.
60s.
Was it 60s? Oh, 20 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
20 years.
S.H.I.E.L.D. was in the 60s.
Late 60s, yeah. Why did I think 79?
Because we were talking about Hellfire Club.
Right. Okay.
Oh,
yes. Okay.
Sorry, we've been looking up a lot of dates. We started getting wires.
Checkmate uses a lot of terminology that we were trying to figure out. Hey, this is the same terminology that they use in the Hellfire Club.
Basically referring to their members as chess pieces.
Chess pieces.
And we were like, who did that first? The Hellfire Club with the Black King and the White Queen, or was it? Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely Hellfire Club, and X-Men had the chess designation first. But Checkmate in the DC Comics, I actually remember some of these when I was a kid because I remember them crossing over into Firestorm and Suicide Squad. There was a big crossover between them all that was really fun. Checkmate is, like I said, clandestine's organization. It's very much set up to be DC's version of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
And they have King Faraday, Amanda Waller, Maxwell Lord, a whole bunch of other characters. One of the most interesting things about this is what I was trying to remember to say earlier. The most interesting thing about the Checkmate organization is that there was a dispute as to which was created first, Checkmate or G.I. Joe. Not G.I. Joe, the concept of the toy, but the whole G.I. Joe Real American Hero. Because the writers actually were creating a script for DC, and it was supposed to be their own spy organization, and they even had DC's criminal spy organization, Cobra, with a K. But it was rejected. It was rejected, and then the writers took it, and they're like, when they were like, hey, can you come up with an idea to go with our long-running line of G.I. Joe toys? And they're like, well, we can create a spy organization and have them fight villain named Cobra, but with a C. That's literally why everybody goes, how could there be a Cobra organization in DC Comics if Cobra is, because they are actually the same organization, the writers just kind of transplanted them over. So that's always kind of a funny thing. But eventually we get Checkmate. I like the characters. King Faraday was very much meant to be like a Nick Fury-esque character with the gruff old salt archetype that you were talking about. Although he had two eyes.
Right, like the older war veteran who just he settled into this job and he's like, I've seen some things.
And they put him in anything that there's any kind of actual like international organization. In the Justice League cartoon, he was there as the look. The Justice League New Frontier, they utilized him in it.
I remember that actually.
He worked with the original Rick Flag character that you see in transition over into Suicide Squad and such as that. And his name is definitely meant to be an inside joke. His father in comics continuity, his father named him King because it sounded like King for a day, and it meant to be a joke. So King Faraday is a play on that word.
I'm only upset with that because I remember hearing that as a child, and I got the joke, but then I was like, that's too silly.
That's too silly.
I'm overthinking this, and then you're like, no, that's actually what it was, and I was like, oh.
Yes, it's actually what it was.
Okay.
Amanda Waller, who was in who ran Task Force X, which was a sister program to the Checkmate organization. In fact, at some point, she takes over Checkmate as the White Queen.
Yes.
And as we all know, Amanda Waller is our favorite leader of the work release program. Is that what they call it in the comic books? Supervillains.
It's like, leader of the Suicide Squad, but also she led a good half of an organization too. And it's like, no, she's got no superpowers. She is just very, very intimidating and very, very cunning
and very smart. She's
very quick-witted.
And that's what makes her scary, is because of course, being a black woman of full stature, she gets completely underestimated by every one of her peers.
Bring back Fat Amanda Waller.
Right. And that's what they call. I love it. She's they call her the Wall because she's an immovable object. She's an immovable object.
It's like, and it's one of those. I still, it's such a missed opportunity with her because they didn't really show it as much in the Suicide Squad movie. Like, she's the one who comes in and has the angry face. Like, the only time you have a moment where you're like, oh no, she really is quick on her feet is when things are going tits up. And she's in the room with the other people in the organization, and she just immediately starts shooting them. She's like, nope, we're not doing this. It's like, but otherwise, if you want to see more like her getting herself out of some really pesky jams, the animated Suicide Squad movies are really good at this.
I liked her in the Justice League animated series. CC Pounder,
I loved her in that.
Who just is the epitome of Amanda Waller in my face, and like her look and her sound, like that's who I hear when I read the comic book.
Yeah.
And she was like the first person smart enough to figure out who Batman was. Well, not first person, but
It was the worst mistake. It's like I watched Assault on Arkham before I saw the newer Suicide Squad movie, and I was so upset because I was like, it's a way better movie. It's such a better movie.
I am looking forward to the new Suicide Squad, though.
It looks better.
It looks better. It looks like it's more fun. So.
Well, I mean, Sylvester Stallone is King Shark. I mean, I don't.
And it's one of those, it's not like the old one where they were like, who's gonna live and who's gonna die, and then everyone makes it out except for like two people. It's a no. Everybody's dying except for like two people, I'm pretty sure. And only because if one dies, they're not going to benefit anymore. You're not going to get that sweet, sweet Harley Quinn money. Right. And the other person who's not going to die, you're going to find out by the time this happens.
Right.
Like, they have basically spoiled it already.
Okay.
Well. But also, I really love how James Gunn is like, he's going for it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
I needed to not take itself seriously.
And it's having Starro in there. I mean, I think
we'll definitely come back to Task Force S when we do our end of.
Yeah, we'll catch about that in August.
Another character you might be surprised to find is Maxwell Lord, was the Black King of the Checkmate organization.
And a stark contrast from what you saw in the Wonder Woman movie.
Oh my gosh!
He is not the same character.
The even a sympathetic character. There's nothing about the character of Maxwell Lord, and he is straight up mustache twirly evil. He's a megalomaniac. You know what was really made me the saddest is that they completely wasted Maxwell Lord on the first season of Supergirl, because all they did was they just made him a cheap knockoff of Lex Luthor, and then they didn't even come back to him after second season when they moved up to Canada.
Which is sad, because it's like he's interesting. It's just everybody who vaguely knows who Maxwell Lord is knows him for one thing, and that's it.
Killing one of my favorite characters of DC of all time.
Yeah, literally, you can just find Maxwell Lord kills the first Blue Beetle. That is almost all the information people know about him.
Right. So
it's like nobody can give me any more.
Now, two more characters that were pretty big in the Checkmate / even Suicide Squad characters, comic books were Nemesis and Nightshade. Now, Nemesis was basically your super master of disguise kind of character. And he had lots of gadgets. He was definitely meant to be the James Bond of the DC Comics world.
All the pictures looked really cool of him.
I didn't really read much stuff with him in it, but I've seen him show up in several things. But another one that I liked that they utilized, and this goes back to just the whole concept of Suicide Squad to begin with. Suicide Squad, as you know, is when DC acquired a bunch of other companies, and they decided to use all their superheroes, and they had this surplus of villains they didn't know what to do with, and hence we get Suicide Squad, where anybody could die. Well, it wasn't just other villains that they had that they didn't know what to do with. There were some characters from the Captain Atom, Charlton character comic books. If you've actually seen Watchmen, and you know that they were all copies of Charlton superheroes, Nightshade, who I'm about to talk about, was the character that Silk Spectre was based off of.
Oh, okay.
So she was the Silk Spectre of the Charlton comic books and everything. And she originally, only her powers were she had the ability to manipulate shadow and light. But they ended up in these comic books, they gave her the ability to also teleport through shadows, which made her a particularly valuable spy. And she worked for both Checkmate and Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad as a spy. So.
Oh yeah, that basically is. Yeah, once I did comparing it to the Silk Spectre costume, I'm like, oh yeah.
You see where they got it from.
That's exactly who that is. There we go.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay.
All right. Next to part 3. Greg, where are we going to next?
Freelance Marvel. So it's individual characters in the Marvel Universe that are known for their spy work.
Cool.
Yes.
And of course, I guess my favorite on the list has to be Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes. Because of course I cosplay as Captain America, and Brad here is my Bucky.
I'm Bucky, but not Winter Soldier.
No, but yeah. So I mean, this character has a long history, obviously, through the World War II issues with him with being next to Captain America,
and even as a sidekick. Now, I do want to point out the reason that we like Bucky Barnes so much is because he has 2 lives as a spy. Because very much like we had said before, there's that overlap between the military and the spies. So during World War II, Bucky actually was much more of the spy of the group than any of the other characters were. Yeah. He was used to infiltrate behind lines and pose as a kid and listen to places where people didn't expect him to be listening. So sneak behind enemy lines and survey and stuff like that. So he had that going for him. Mm-hmm. And then of course y'all know how he gets to the modern age. Yeah. Very much true to form, like in the MCU movies. He is found frozen. His arm is unsavable, so they give him the cyber arm, and they brainwash him and turn him into the Winter Soldier, where they keep him on cryogenic suspension, only to take him out every so often to
give him missions
until they send him after the wrong guy, after Captain America, who helps him snap out of it.
Hey.
Ed Brubaker ran a really good series after the whole story that actually reintroduced Bucky as the Winter Soldier. Once he finally gets his mind straight and everything, much like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, only it's more of a solo kind of thing. He has a lot of, if you're into political intrigue, if you like Captain America 2, the Winter Soldier, where you had the military spy thriller, the Tom Clancy kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, espionage.
there's been 3 or 4 Winter Soldier series to come out since then. There was one from before he was Captain America, and then like a few after he was Captain America. And a lot of those include interactions with Black Widow, who also, because of her having taken the Infinity Formula in the comic books for the longevity of life, you find that they've actually done missions together in the past, and so there's some really good stories in that.
Okay.
So anyway, very fun character, and obviously, I personally loved the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series, and
I did too.
That was such a joy.
yeah,
I loved that.
mean, and I love Sebastian Stan as Winter Soldier and Bucky. He's done an amazing job playing this character.
And he does such a
Oh
beautiful,
my gosh.
nuanced job in Falcon and the Winter
You know
Soldier.
what they could do? They could totally do this. Well, no, that I can't.
Right? It's like the only thing that it's like I'm having to slowly learn to temper my expectations, because like I hear little things like, oh yeah, he was interconnected with Black Widow for a little bit, and then my imagination explodes, and I'm like, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen. Like I'm like, oh my god, he might show up. This might happen. It might be this. And it's like, no, because they're gonna hear it and they're gonna be like, screw you guys. No, you don't get to guess.
I don't know, but obviously, Anthony Mackie is going to be moving on to the big screen for Captain America now. He may or may not be taking Bucky along for the ride, but you know what might be interesting is a flashback series a la very similar to WandaVision, but instead of it being, TV series, it can literally be, every time that they thaw him out, and have like one solid thing for him to come back to,
That's
and have
kind
it
of crazy, but
just
awesome.
just a Winter Soldier series where
Well, they did a little bit of that in Falcon Winter Soldier too.
Right,
so
I know.
Just a little taste.
a little bit. But imagine if, like, they wrote a story where he discovers something and he has to remember all of his past missions, and because whatever it is connects them all together, and so he keeps going back. And
Well, that's what that notebook was all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for all of his atonements. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we could see what those different missions were. That would be great.
Right, and it could be, and it could be like the first half is the flashback, the second half is like him actually hunting down the character and
Right.
like doing the atonement.
And then we finally see what happened with that one guy's son that was in the show. I know, it was so tricky. All right, here's a new one that may be a surprise for you. Coming up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're looking forward to this in September. Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. Yay, we finally are getting Shang-Chi. Well, Shang-Chi has a really, really strong comic book pedigree as a multi-disciplined superhero. He's more than just their Bruce Lee, Asian fascination, Hong Kong Phooey kind of character. He's also their MI6 Scotland Yard spy guy, which is really cool. I didn't know that.
It's like I didn't, and it makes me sad because because looking at the previews for Shang-Chi, they don't really talk about it.
Okay, so Shang-Chi is the son of. Okay, you got to back up to what we're talking about. We're talking about World War II spy comics. Okay, there was a comic book, Action Comics first introduces him is in DC Comics or in Marvel Comics. No, yes, DC Comics, not DC Comics.
Are we talking about the father?
The father.
Okay, the father has
Fu
been
Manchu.
in every single iteration of everything. Starting, I think he was first created back in the movies, and then in print, like actual books and stuff. And the character has been like stolen and like used in just about everything.
So originally during World War II, there was a character
It's
named,
way before World War II.
Way before World War II? Okay.
We're talking like maybe the 20s.
Oh wow! So
It was a minute ago,
Fu Manchu is a Chinese character that usually stands for like the worst of Chinese fears, like what people fear.
The Yellow Peril.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he in Marvel Comics version, he is a bad guy, so his son is Shang-Chi. And Shang-Chi is trying to find him to get retribution and stuff like that.
Right. And his mother is British, and that's how he ends up. So this is one of the things I found interesting about it, because if everybody remembers bear with me, Iron Fist. When Iron Fist was first cast with Finn Jones, we're like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity, Marvel, that you have to, give us some diversity. Let's make him a Chinese character instead of, this other white guy, cultural appropriation thing and everything. And one of the actors that they were saying that they were going to use is Louis Tam. And they ended up not using him because obviously they went with Finn Jones, but they did use Louis Tam the second season as a drunken master, and he used his British accent. And I thought that was
check our fight scene episode.
Check our fight scene, exactly. We did have that one there. But I'm like, okay, I like this with the British accent and everything and stuff like that. Well, then I find out that Louis Tam was actually in the running for Shang-Chi, and instead it went to his friend Simu Liu. So he ended up getting the role for Mortal Kombat instead. But now, knowing that he's British, because I've never read him British in my head, I've never seen any other media with him in it.
Yeah.
So knowing that Shang-Chi is actually Chinese British, and he was on MI6, I'm like, and I hear Louis Tam doing the drunken master with the British accent, I'm like, I want him to be Shang-Chi now.
Right. Once I found it, yeah, because that's not what I expected. They were just like, oh yeah, he's in my six, and I'm like, what?
He's what?
But right now, due to rights issues, no one really can use Fu Manchu.
Okay.
Because literally everybody has used this character, and no one knows exactly where the rights lay right now. And there's so.
Now, Marvel will have you believe it. Maybe it is to a degree because they sometimes they're on the ball, sometimes they're not. Because it's about cultural sensitivity. It would not have surprised me if the rights had been open, if they'd have used Fu Manchu.
Right.
But
still, follow the copyright. There's usually a copyright issue.
But lucky for us, we don't have to see that, and so they have substituted him for the Mandarin in the movie, which is good because Mandarin has
Which
they
is
had to yada yada him
100%
back into
Marvel
the-
villain.
Okay, he's not necessarily more sensitive,
No.
but he's definitely 100% Marvel, and Marvel has more free reign to tweak it.
Well, and it's
So
a
hopefully
chance
the
at retribution.
Yeah.
Because, there were not a lot of people who took the Mandarin twist in Iron Man very well. So
Right.
I'm sure they were like, oh, never mind. No, this is the real Mandarin.
But
It's like, they have
And
a
I don't
chance
know what to think about the
try
rings.
again.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about the rings either. We're gonna
Because
have to
they're
talk
not
about that.
rings on the
They're
fingers.
not rings. They're a whole other thing.
They're power
It's very
rings on his
confusing
arm.
to me,
Yeah.
and it's just bangles. They're
It's-
bangle bracelets.
It is going
He's
to
got
look,
big fancy bangle bracelets.
it will look very bright and shiny on the screen. I'm sure that's why they did it, because they're like using his hands with
Right.
like fancy rings doesn't look as cool as him like pushing his
Pushing
arms
down.
down and like the rings shooting
Shooting
out.
out.
Like, I get it. The effect looks cool. They had
Well,
to spend their money somewhere,
I
and they
just-
wasted it all on the dragon and the 10 rings.
Yes, okay. They wasted on the red. Now the thing that upsets me, it's very much to me, it's in my mind, it's the same thing as cutting Medusa's hair on Inhumans. It's
Yeah.
like
Y'all-
each of the 10 rings can magnetism or whatever, and so there's like 10 different special effects they would have to do. Whereas these rings just all seem to do one thing.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
just
they're like blasty.
They're blasty.
They're just blasty.
They hover.
We'll see.
They
We'll
look
see.
cool. They blast.
Haven't seen the movie yet, so we'll
Haven't
see what
seen
they
it.
do.
We're really excited about it. I'm not
Again,
sure
we
I've formed opinions about Abomination yet, but
Right? Again, we wasted all the money on the dragon,
On the
so
dragon.
we couldn't spend the money on the effects of the ring.
And I really am just. We can talk so much more about this, but we're gonna have to wait and see the film. We're gonna have to wait and see the film. I really am concerned, considering it doesn't really seem Marvel's putting a lot
they're
of.
not putting enough effort into it. You're right.
They're not putting a lot of stuff behind it. I know that one of our friends, Frank, has been desperately looking to see if he could find out who was the.
I
Fight
think
choreographer.
I think he eventually did nail one down. We'll have to talk about it when we do a review. Or
But
review.
that's-
Yeah, we'll ask them.
That's a big thing, especially with the Chinese crowd, is they know their fight choreographers. So if you've got
If you get
if you're
from
going
Hong
on for Hong Kong fight choreography,
Yeah.
just saying the name of that fight choreographer, you're like,
You know,
okay, I know
right.
what kind of movie this is gonna be.
Right.
So,
But if you do
So I
decide
know
to go
that
back,
this
apparently I'm gonna have to find a collected edition somewhere because I'm actually
Hmm.
way more intrigued by the whole just the martial arts aspect of it didn't really seem that much of a draw to me. But
And then they're
knowing
like,
that
by the way, he's a spy.
here's the thing: we've been looking all week at like different superhero spy things, and I have consistently found things going. You know, next to the original Jim Steranko, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Marvel's Master of Kung Fu is like the best suspense and mystery comic book that you could get. And I
Really?
several things.
Yeah.
The one that when Greg was reviewing it. So and now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to pick that up. But anyway, if you do decide to go back and pick that up, and you're like, who is this Fu Manchu dude?
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
All right.
so the next one is a fan favorite.
Mystique.
Mystique.
Yeah, gotta love Mystique. Especially in the movies, they've brought her a lot more into focus and made her a lot more central than in the comics.
Yeah.
Which is going to
But-
be a fun endurance test because
Which in
Jennifer
the
Lawrence
movies-
wants nothing
In
to
the
do with it
movies,
anymore.
she
Yeah.
does spying on behalf of her own interest, but she's not necessarily a spy. But for a while in the comic books, they actually had her do like a full-on espionage gig.
Yeah. Might as well.
I mean, she's got like
She's
the skill
perfect
set.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
she's
it's
perfect.
like,
you need
She
her
can morph
infiltration.
her vocal and visual appearance to match anyone. So
I'm curious. I never read it, but I wonder if she ever encountered the Chameleon in that.
that'd be hilarious.
Because Chameleon is the super spy bad guy. I mean, even in the 90s animated cartoon, that's how they used it to introduce Nick Fury to the Spider-Man cartoon, was the Chameleon. So, and he's definitely a Spycraft type character. But yeah,
Right.
Mystique for a while, she worked for Professor Xavier. What did Bo tell us when we were asking him earlier? Infiltrating
Infiltrating Homeland Security.
Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Okay. On behalf of the mutants. So she
Which I did not know listed as part of her power set. She actually has a power in common with another Marvel mutant,
which
What?
Cypher.
really?
Yes, they have that listed on her
All right.
Marvel
So-
wiki page, as she can immediately understand and interpret any language she encounters.
Nice.
She
Wow.
Okay.
So I got it here.
So if that was too far for you guys, they talked about she had on top of all of her other things, she can listen to and interpret any language, which again, easy spy
Ultimate
character.
infiltrator.
Yeah.
Ultimate
Easy spy
infiltrator.
character.
And that's always been Mystique's thing, though, is that she's always been a perfect infiltrator. She's
Yeah, she did. There's no barrier she actually has to overcome to
Yeah.
spy. It's like she can look like them, sound like them. If they speak another language, she can just
Yeah.
switch languages. It's one of those. Of course, they were like, I mean, we're not gonna make her a spy, but then after a while, they're like, fine. I guess we'll make her a spy. All right,
Okay, and now for our next section.
we're rounding it out, guys.
So we're off the solo heroes
Of
and
Marvel.
of spies of Marvel, and now we're going to be
We're in
the
Shields.
major spy organization in
In
Marvel, for the good guys, anyways. Is
Yep.
Shield.
It's like giving you a nice rundown in time for Black Widow in a
Um,
couple weeks.
So Shield has had multiple. You know what? I want to read those to you. Shield has had actual multiple words. Their acronym has been.
Sword.
No, not just that, but originally, what did Shield stand for?
Is it something silly?
They're all different. There's been at least like 5.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, first appearing in 1969, not 79, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., was the preeminent spy style. It was amazing. Not just because of
Oh, sweet heavens.
not just because of the new type of genre that it was creating in the super spy characters, but also in the art direction. It was taking very much of its influence from pop art and your Andy Warhol style stuff and
Something to make it like
would-
sickeningly American looking.
yes, but it's very, very stylish, very big. And definitely you can see that when, like, even in the 90s, Austin Powers, everybody's like, oh, where are they getting all this weird stuff from? A lot of it was from the Nick Fury comic books of the 60s.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, it's very war propaganda. Like, if they were doing a resurgence of war propaganda, it's like, that's very much what this looks like. And I did find all the acronyms for S.H.I.E.L.D.
All the acronyms for S.H.I.E.L.D.?
All of them.
All right, what's the current one?
Okay, so today it stands for Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division.
Yeah. All right. What was it originally?
Okay, it gave me two. So one of them is Strategic Hazard Intervention Espionage Logistics Directorate, which doesn't sound as catchy, or Supreme Headquarters International Espionage Law Enforcement Division,
Supreme
which also
Headquarters
doesn't sound catchy.
Yeah, Supreme Headquarters
Like,
is what I remember.
I put my phone down for 2 seconds and immediately forgot. Like, I'm gonna have to look at it later. If someone asks me, don't quiz me on this.
Now, the fun thing about Nick Fury that I like the most about him personally was of all of the things in the Ultimate Universe that came out in the early 2000s was I loved their version of Nick Fury, and he was so beloved that they actually had him be the version they used in the MCU.
Yeah.
So, which
most importantly,
this is one of my favorite life imitating art, imitating life kind of full circle things. Is like when they actually literally created the new Nick Fury for the Ultimate Universe, Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Universe. They very specifically wanted him to be Samuel L. Jackson in comic book form. So they wrote his character around that. So of course, 12 years later, when they go in and make this movie, they ask him to do it. He's like, sure. And it's like,
yeah.
I just have to be myself. This is very much a Woody Harrelson playing Carnage kind of situation.
Right, and it's delightful for me because if you ever follow any nerdy information about Samuel L. Jackson, this happens a lot. This happens a lot. Like, look up his story on how he made it into Star Wars. It happens so much. And he gets so much leeway. But this, like, immediately they were like, we're going to put him in the MCU. And they loved it.
Well, for years and years, Nick Fury was like the go-to super spy character in Marvel Comics. And believe it or not, Samuel L. Jackson was not the first Nick Fury to be portrayed on television. Back in the 90s, when they were still trying to, lesser companies were still trying to burn through some of their licensings from Marvel before they were up. I think David S. Goyer, who wrote Man of Steel, he wrote the first Blade movie, he writes a lot of legit superhero stuff. He wrote a Nick Fury pilot movie that played on Fox, I think in like 98. And they got, of all people, tell us, class.
David Hasselhoff.
David Hasselhoff.
Back when he was sort of acting seriously.
And when he was, I think he had just finished Baywatch or something for the third time.
We were just like you.
Baywatch, then he did Night Watch, I think, and then I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
They actually, it's funny because the reason I suggest watching this is because it is campy, yes, but it's self-aware campy. And even
it's such a it's a fun time.
Even David Hasselhoff plays it campy in just the right way, not like quite Adam West campy, but like enough to where it's you are aware that this is not the real world. He is a parody of himself at this point. He's a parody of himself at this point. But the thing that's really the most interesting about it, if you get a chance to watch it, I suggest doing it. You can probably find it bootlegged at a convention. Is that it's again David S. Goyer, who is precursor to Blade and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. It was the first time where you could actually tell that a comic book property was being developed as a comic book property, as opposed to things before then where they try to just like make it more realistic or try and take out the fantastical elements and basically are embarrassed of the pedigree of said property. This is the first one where they're like, we're going to embrace it, we're going to love it, but we're going to treat it with respect. And this is very much what leads into his Iron Man script. You can see Iron Man as the first of what we consider that Marvel, they get it. Like, people watched it, walked in there and like, oh, because they're like, okay, yeah, you know, some of it's silly, but at the same time, they're not just avoiding it or apologizing for it and kind of thing. And so it's crazy. Interesting. We were talking about the Contessa. Come on, what's her name?
Oh, okay.
It's a test. We're putting her on the spot.
I know. I'm like, it's Contessa Valentina Allegra Delafontaine.
Delafontaine.
It took me 2 weeks to memorize
It
that.
was apparently originally supposed to appear in the Black Widow movie, but because it got rearranged, she ended up appearing at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
She's supposed to still be in the Black Widow movie from what
Yes, I know, but she was supposed to be
Spoiler
in that
alert.
first. She was supposed to be in that first, and they had
It's
to
like
rewrite
we
the story.
messed the order up.
We messed the order up.
It's like, because, no, that's why it took so long for a lot of stuff to get here, because Black Widow was literally supposed to be next.
Mm-hmm.
And everything kept going wrong, and they kept pushing it, and finally they're like, we'll just throw everything in here. But technically, she's supposed to show up first in the Black Widow movie.
So it's gonna be really interesting to see.
Yes,
I'm excited.
But
I want to see.
She was in the David Hasselhoff Nick Fury movie. That character was there. She was a former lover of Nick Fury. So
she dates Nick Fury.
So we're all kind of wondering if, like, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if we're gonna get like a Julia Louis-Dreyfus / Samuel L. Jackson team up, and will they play their mean selves or will they play their funny selves?
Right, and it's
I don't know where you go.
Right, and it's like, and they had to explain it to me, because literally all I have known is Nick Fury. Is Samuel L. Jackson Nick Fury, who is apparently Nick Fury Jr. He is the long lost son of Nick Fury.
Sort of. Okay, so Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson Nick Fury was created for the parallel Ultimate Universe, where they relaunched everything in the 2000s, and so much awful came from that. Like, the only two things worth their salt to me are Miles Morales and Nick Fury. But Miles Morales moved into the regular comic books. Nick Fury was adapted to the screen. Well, in the main comic books, of course, he was still like the old white David Hasselhoff-y Nick Fury, until they realized how popular the movie version was, and they wanted to have some kind of an approximation in the main continuity, but they didn't want to just like give Nick Fury plastic surgery or something.
Right,
stupid.
just kill the first one and be like, it's a title, not a name.
Exactly. So now all of a sudden, it's like, why do all of a sudden we have a Black Nick Fury in the main comic books? Well, it's his long lost son who didn't know he was Nick Fury Jr., and then by machinations of Scorpio, he ends up getting outed. He also just happens to have somehow followed in his father's footsteps because Nick Fury is secretly leading him through military training behind him.
Yada, comic book logic, it's fine.
Bad guy plucks out his eye so he looks like his dad. Now he's got a patch, and we're there.
Right, the explanation in the movies is funnier for how he lost his eye.
Yes, but I really honestly do not even want to go through the energy of telling you. You know, if you want to find out
silly
what happened to Nick Fury in the end of his career in Marvel main continuity, go look that up. In a comic book, I think it's Original Sin is where that happens. Yeah. It's like the dumbest thing. So
yeah, but
it's too dumb to even say here on the show.
But there's a couple of things in Original Sin that
Original Sin has some great stuff. That's where we get Cindy Moon and Jane Foster, Thor, and Cindy Moon, Silk, and a lot of them really good characters and stories and directions came from that.
And some deep dive character study on Thor.
Yeah, it was a good shakeup.
Yeah.
I'm just opening so many tabs now.
Yeah.
Just.
So next is Spider-Woman.
Spider-Woman, yay. Okay, so Spider-Woman is great. If y'all know the story of how Spider-Woman came to be, Stan Lee was trying to avoid anybody stealing the copyright for Spider-Woman because, of course, Spider-Man was so popular. And he created this Marvel Spotlight first appearance of Spider-Woman, and he kind of rushed it. But he
didn't really create the character. He just said Spider-Woman name, throw some sort of character, and so Marv Wolfman
came
and basically did the backstory and created Spider-Woman.
So Spider-Woman, when she discovered her powers, Hydra found her. So Hydra found her and trained her and convinced her that they were not a terrorist organization; they were a freedom fighting organization. And they had one of their spies romance her, basically seduce her. And he was actually just controlling her from behind the scenes until Hydra murdered him. Hydra murdered him and made it look like Nick Fury did it.
Oh.
So that they could motivate Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, to go and kill Nick Fury.
Oh.
And that's how her career started, as she was an assassin for Hydra. And of course, in like doing this whole thing, Nick Fury reveals to her that, you know, Hydra's been playing her and everything. But the reason this is really cool is because for the biggest part of her early adventures, she was a double spy.
Yeah, double agent.
She was a double agent. So she was actually working for S.H.I.E.L.D. while pretending to work for Hydra. So very cool. I love how Spider-Woman in her entire history, even when she does actually interact with Spider-Man, is that they both have spider in their name, but they're not related.
Yeah,
They
they
don't
are
have
two
anything-
completely
yeah.
separate characters.
Different
And
power
they go
sources
out of their way to tell
to
people.
tell people that they're not
No
related.
relation.
I have no idea who this dude is.
Yeah. So I love Spider-Woman's character. I loved her modern versions and stuff.
And the cartoon was fun too.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
It wasn't very much super spy. They made it more
No,
like,
not
you
at all.
know,
She was like I want to almost say that she was like industrialist.
she ran a fashion magazine.
Yeah.
Spider-Woman in the cartoon owned a fashion magazine, and they would fly around and make up stupid fashion or glamour related parallels to like incidents that were happening. And it's like, Tokyo's on fire. How does this affect the makeup industry? I don't know. We're gonna fly out there and do an article about it so Spider-Woman can seek out the Tokyo fire is out. I don't know. It was weird. It was weird.
But it was fun.
It was fun. It was fun and entertaining,
Yeah,
and it was
that
fun
sounds
to do
entertaining.
everything. So after
So
Spider-Woman,
Should we do the other ones before we get to her?
Yeah, we're
yeah.
saving
Last-
Black Widow for last.
so then we're gonna do the Carters. Originally, there was no Peggy Carter, correct? Originally in the comic books, it was Sharon Carter, but then when they tried to modernize her,
I haven't read the Captain America stuff in so long, but I want to say that there was a character there. I don't know if they ever really mentioned what her name was or anything,
right?
but I want to say there was a female character there that was kind of like the secretary or whatever. That was kind of,
Right.
you know, that had a
Sorry.
crush on Steve Rogers, but
From what I remember, mostly the main thing
But
is that in spite of the movie canon, where we get to meet Peggy first, Sharon Carter happened first. Sharon Carter was Captain America's girlfriend when she was thawed out, but then they eventually went back and retconned and created Peggy Carter for flashbacks.
That makes more sense because there is a thing that I'll talk about when we get to Contessa. But yeah, when I was reading the thing and they were like, "Oh yeah, she flirted with Captain America, which made Sharon Carter mad," and I was like, "What?"
Yes. 'Cause, yeah, Sharon Carter was Captain America's girlfriend after he got thawed out on the ice, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is always kind of creepy, and I'm glad that they didn't go with that in the movies. There was that part in the movies where you almost thought they were going to go there and he kissed Sharon, but it was
Right.
kind of...
And they're kind of
And that kind of highlighted how creepy it actually was in the comic book. But in the comic book, he didn't go back in time to Peggy. In the comic book, he actually dated Sharon for a long time, and she became Agent 13.
Well, and they're gently alluding that he played with her emotions and it messed up her life in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
So
But
I
I'm
wouldn't
like,
go
we're
that
just
far
gonna
with it.
avoid
I
that.
think it was more that everybody used her and ditched her.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, they used her to get their stuff back and all this kind of intel on the inside, all this kind of stuff. And then when they were done with her, they didn't do anything to protect her.
Protector, yeah.
Yeah, and it all links into that, but they tried to make it kind of gently sound like, oh, this played a big part in it, and I'm like, please don't. This isn't, like, they made her more interesting than the bits I saw in comics.
But the Peggy Carter, Agent Carter TV show was a great...
Oh, I love
Example.
that.
That was great. I had fun with that.
And it's a superhero espionage thing. She's definitely spying. And
Yeah.
I mean, even so much as to one of her main antagonists is a precursor to Black Widow, the Dottie character.
Oh, yeah.
I love the Dottie Black Widow, so she was really cool.
I mean, there was so much about that show that I loved.
She was from the same
I loved
program, just
yeah.
previously.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Sorry, I didn't.
But
I didn't.
I loved so much about that show,
That's okay.
especially the first season. The first season, I loved how accurate it was to the time period.
Yeah.
And how much, I mean, there were some things in there that I was really happy that they did that.
A lot of fun elements.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, even down to the cans and the set design and stuff like that.
That's the reason I liked the last season of S.H.I.E.L.D. so much, is was they went back and they wrapped up the storylines and characters, and I really just loved it.
Yeah, they did. It's like, it's the one thing I'll give them credit for. They do period pieces really well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good, because you're Disney, you're made of money, not a hair should be out of place. It's like, just, it's lovely.
I'm sorry, I thought we might have cut you off.
No, it's fine.
Okay. The last one I want to talk about, this was just a really weird, because I just love to regale Anna with the what of history of comic books, as she says, because comic books are some crazy stuff. Well, this is actually one of my favorite things is Richard and Mary Parker.
Peter Parker's mother and father, real mother and father.
Were spies in the comic book. And
that was not a joke.
This is not a joke. In fact, the official cause of death is that they were killed in a plane crash on a mission for FBI. And the reason that the first time I came across this part of the story was when the Chameleon, this is in the 90s, in a story where Chameleon made life model decoys, which is a running thing in all of Marvel Spy, just so you know, made life model decoys of Richard and Mary Parker to think that Peter Parker was, to make Peter think that his parents were back from the dead, because he actually had some information that led to a treasure. They used this in the 90s cartoon. They don't have the Android part, but they do a flashback where
they also reference them being spies in the Andrew Garfield.
In the Andrew Garfield one, yep.
They do, and that one still shocks me, because the movies were my first exposure, or well, the cartoons too, but the movies were my first exposure to Spider-Man, and so a lot of people, when the Andrew Garfield movie came out, were like, okay, this was fine, but what the hell was with that spy-aside? Is this a joke?
There was supposed to be a bigger payoff in the third one. It didn't happen.
Yeah, and I'm like, cool, whatever. That was a thing they were supposed to do. They never finished. And then I hear, oh, no, that actually wasn't a joke. And I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, yeah, no, they were spies.
Yeah, Okay, I'm going to come out and say it.
Do it.
I'm glad that Kevin Feige is basically driving the Spider-Man films, because there's so many times that Sony has bitten off their foot to spite themselves when it comes to the Spider-Man franchises.
Oh my God, yes.
The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, I would have loved if they had left Sam Raimi alone and let him do Spider-Man 3 the way he wanted.
Yeah.
I loved what he was doing with Sandman. I would have loved to see more of that, to see what, because I mean, that's one of the things that Sam Raimi does really well. Like, Dr. Octopus never really had a really in-depth, like, origin story like in Spider-Man 2. And I was like, wow, that was so amazing to see how much they delved into that character and made that character so relevant and so amazing, when most of the comics, he's just kind of like a comedic, villain in a lot of ways. So I was really looking forward to seeing Sandman, and who was a really interesting character in the Marvel Universe, and see what Sam Raimi was going to do with him. And then on top of that, closing the Green Goblin arc. Right. I think that was plenty for him to do. Right. And then to have to add the black costume and the Venom in there into one movie.
That was too much.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it right here. I personally feel that if they're going to do Venom, what they should have done, one movie, The Avengers, Secret Wars.
Yep.
Second movie, Spider-Man in the black costume through the entire thing. At the end of the movie, he gets rid of the black costume, and the teaser Easter egg is Eddie Brock getting and becoming Venom.
Hey.
Third movie, Venom.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're going to do Venom, that's the way I think you need to do it.
Going back to Spies, though, a character that I really like very much that has come up recently, barely, not even 10 years ago, I don't think, is when they first introduced her, is a new Spider-Man character, Teresa Parker, who is, in fact, Mary and Richard's daughter that was put up for adoption that Peter never knew about.
Okay.
And it actually has been a really fun story. I love the Dan Slott era of Spider-Man and all the stuff they added in there. And I was kind of concerned as to what the Nick Spencer take on it was going to be, but he actually picked up with that. And so having Teresa Parker, his sister, show up, and it first shows up with the Kingpin because she also has been raised in S.H.I.E.L.D. as a spy. So she was a government agent spy too. And she finds out about the Foreigner. Foreigner was another early Marvel villain in Spider-Man comic books who was there very much an evil James Bond. That was strictly what he was an evil James Bond character. And you find out he's the one who killed their parents. And so the current story in the comic book right now is a follow-up to the Chameleon making the robots of Peter's parents, because it's called the Chameleon Conspiracy. The Chameleon is working with Silver Sable and the Foreigner, and they're all playing off of each other.
And the reason why Silver Sable isn't on this list is she's more of a mercenary.
She's more of a mercenary. But she is definitely part of the. So anyway, even now in the current Spider-Man comic book, there is a nice little espionage, shape-shifting spy / robot building spy / long lost sister spy story.
So now we're going to talk about Black Widow, who is probably the premier spy
in Marvel Comics
other than Nick Fury.
Yep.
Yes.
All kinds of stuff.
Natasha Romanoff.
I know. Well, you do it, because give us the long, short and sweet, because basically when we get back from the thing, we're gonna do.
We're gonna really give you it.
So basically, she was molded by the Russian KGB
Yes.
to be their premier assassin / spy.
Right.
By the organization called the Red Room.
But didn't they blackmail her because her husband was the first Red Guardian, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we'll figure that out next episode.
Okay.
We'll figure those in.
So we'll go more into that. But basically, you saw a lot of this in the MCU stuff, the movies, where they basically molded her and made her into a super spy / agent.
Yes.
Assassin. And I think that none of the movies did her more justice than the first Avengers.
Yeah.
The first
Yes,
Avengers,
absolutely.
there was 2 specific scenes where she just was mind-blowingly amazing, and a lot of that, of course, is Scarlett Johansson. And so I'm really excited and happy that she finally has her own movie, and we're gonna get to see it.
Oh, and it's like I said, the fact that they kept basically we spent a year and a half pushing it back, and then it's like, and they were so adamant, we are not doing anything else until this Black Widow movie comes out. I'm like, this better be good.
All right.
It's gonna be good. I'm excited.
Well, then on that note, we thank you for joining us. This has been a fun summer so far. And like I said, we're going to do some slight tweaks to the show before we come back. And we're going to do our review of Black Widow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a couple of things I'd like to say really quick, especially for the Austin crowd. Free Comic Book Day is going to be August 14th.
Okay.
And so Red Web is supposed to be at Free Comic Book Day, so we'll be talking about it from Free Comic Book Day. And I think Kaiju Labs Media in general is going to be at Free Comic Book Day, so that should be a lot of fun.
All right.
Also, on top of that, that same day is Pride Festival here in Austin.
Hey,
So
we are going to be exhausted.
June obviously is Pride for the world, so happy Pride to everybody.
Oh.
And our parade is in
August 14th.
We're gonna be diddly dang exhausted. It's gonna be a long day.
And it's also the same weekend as Hill Country Comic Con.
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay.
It's gonna be a long weekend.
Yeah. Like okay.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in. Make sure you check with us regularly, and we'll let you know when we're back up to scheduling new episodes and new content. And like and subscribe. Go to Kaiju Labs Media and check us out at the end of the summer.
Yep.
Awesome.
We're gonna
Take
see
care,
you.
guys. Have fun.
Bye.